City Council is delaying a decision on a zoning change that could allow the Knife River Construction Company to move its operations to the Leeds neighborhood. KTIV's Connor Trett was at that city council meeting and joins us live in studio now. And Connor, why has the council decided to defer this decision for now?
Well, Larry, as this rezoning proposal would reclassify a 30-acre piece of land located at the 3700 Jefferson Street from general commercial to general industrial. Knife River had approached the owner of that parcel of land in hopes of possibly relocating their facilities there, since they'll be able to build a larger facility than what they already have on Hawkeye Drive. Now, as far as why the decision was deferred tonight, well, there are a few reasons. Chief among them was that not all the members of the council were at the meeting tonight, and they didn't feel they should make this decision without a full council. Other reasons came in from some of the Leeds residents coming into the council and voicing their concerns of what moving Knife River to the area could do to the quality of life for nearby residents in Leeds.
I think that there's too many people that are going to be affected, could be affected by this, and financially, you know, it could affect house sales, how fast you can sell your house, the value of your house if you're being that close to what Knife River does. Quality of life, from noise, dust, the smell of the asphalt. I mean, all things that Knife River should be doing and needs to be doing. I just don't think it needs to be doing it in that area.
The City Council ultimately decided to defer this decision by 3 weeks. I spoke with Mayor Bob Scott after the meeting about what question marks that the council still had about the proposal.
Well, I think some of the council still would be supportive of the project, and I'm speaking for them and I shouldn't, but they want to see that site plan to try to move as much of the things that may be a little adverse to the neighborhood as far away from the neighborhood as they can.
Over the next 3 weeks, the City Council hopes to see an in-depth layout from Knife River as far as where they plan to put their buildings, their trucks, and what plans they have to make the roads out of, as well as measures they take to protect the nearby neighborhood. Now, the next decision will be made on this proposal at the council's meeting on Monday, September 9th.